You need to get with me, girl.
I am not into Neanderthals. Go back to your cage.
I always get what I want. Ha 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 ha!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Frames Bar. What can I get you? While you think about that, actually, I hope you don't mind if I treat myself to one of these. One of my favorites. Never fails to please. Unlike fighting games. How do you like that segue? Maybe I'm finally getting good at this. I think I've noticed that these episodes tend to be better when I don't have a script, when I kind of have a couple of thoughts that I roll with, so that's what I'm going to do. First of all, shocking news earlier today. OnlyFans are going to be banning sexually explicit content on their platform, which I thought was a troll when I saw it because, as far as I know, sexually explicit content is the entire premise of that platform. But I don't know that for a fact because I've never been. And I'm not saying that because I want to pretend that I've never looked at porn. I just never saw the appeal of something like OnlyFans. I think it's kind of like streaming, but instead of somebody speedrunning Yoshi's Island, it's somebody shoving a cucumber up their ass. Which, now that I think about it, is actually really funny. Like, what if you catch one of those awkward streamers who isn't good at the social aspects? They're trying to fake an orgasm and interact with chat at the same time. They have to stop halfway and thank somebody for the $20. That is actually too good. I might have to catch a couple of those streams before they implement that change. But I think the interesting point is that it just goes to show that this whole content creation thing, streaming, it could just go up in smoke one day. It's still so new. There's no reason Twitch can't go, oh, we can't have people playing video games on this site anymore because of copyright, and then thousands of people lose their jobs. Hopefully we can still sit around and talk about video games on Twitch in a hot tub with nothing but finger paint on our nips and goosh. Maybe the OnlyFans people can move over to Twitch and make a living there. Maybe the Twitch streamers will go to OnlyFans and play video games. That'd be pretty funny. Who knows what the future holds. Anyway, Tekken, right? Apparently Evo is happening right now. I say apparently because I genuinely don't know. It doesn't seem to have garnered a lot of attention this time around. There doesn't seem to be that much buzz. The funniest thing I've seen so far, I saw it a bunch of times. It's like top competitive players making social media posts where they say, hey everybody, I won Evo actually. And the fans are like, really? That's so cool. Good for you. So I think it's fair to say that Evo has lost a step compared to previous years, but I genuinely made an effort to care about it the other day because I saw that Eris, or somebody who works for him, had uploaded his restreams of Evo or the different events to YouTube. And like I've said, that's the only way I want to watch Tekken tournaments anymore, because he turns down the volume on all those things that I find annoying and abrasive about those tournaments. I get to listen to somebody who's actually charming and funny, talking over all the shitty parts, and then I can watch the gameplay. So I was thinking about doing that to kill some time, but I wanted to understand when Evo was happening and where it was happening and who was playing, and I googled for a couple of minutes, but I wasn't able to penetrate that. I don't think the message was on point. Maybe it was my bad, but I couldn't tell you. But I think the main event of Evo is yet to go down. It's still coming up, and if they're going to make some sort of big announcement, that's where it's going to happen. Who knows? They might not have anything this time around. I think that's actually likely, but if they do, as far as I can tell, they can kind of go one of two ways, right? It can be more content for Tekken 7, i.e. Season 5 or whatever, or they can reveal some sort of new project, Tekken Immortal, Tekken 8, I don't know. I don't think they're going to be working on a new Tekken game anytime soon, but it's definitely what I'm hoping for. I think it's what most people are hoping for. Tekken 7 feels, I guess the word is stagnant now. Some people have been saying it since Season 2. It's old and bloated, and it feels like it. It would be so great to have something new and fresh in this franchise to play with. But do they want to make a new game in this franchise? I started thinking about it, and I was thinking about games like Overwatch 2 and Smash Ultimate. Overwatch 2 is a really weird one because it's a sequel, but not really, because it has cross-play with the previous game in the same franchise. So it's actually a content patch, not even that big of a content patch, I guess an expansion or something, disguised as a sequel. And I was thinking about Ultimate, how, I mean, I heard stories for years about how Sakurai was so burned out and tired of making Smash Brothers, and then they start releasing by far the most ambitious Smash Brothers game of all time that has everything. They're trying to please the casuals, the competitive players. Literally every character in the world is in the game, but I just had this strong feeling that Sakurai was trying to give everybody anything they could ever ask of him in one last big bang, so that he could jump on a horse and ride into the sunset and move on with his life, do something different or nothing. You know. So I was thinking about that, and I came home. I was thinking about talking about it in this video, and then I saw the thumbnail for the next Harada's Bar video, and it's Sakurai and Harada talking about retirement. So I guess maybe I had some intuition there, maybe not. I think it's kind of obvious to most people who listen to them that the spark and the passion isn't really there anymore. Who knows what they will be talking about in that video? Are they both planning to retire? Is it just Sakurai? If it is interesting, then we will rendezvous back here, you and me, and we'll talk about it. I was thinking about the idea of Harada leaving the Tekken project. I mean, he's gotten a lot of flack for what's been happening with Tekken 7, and I think most of it honestly deserved, but has he also been a force that has been holding this whole thing together for a long time? Has he been staving off some sort of Kraken off the side of the map? If he's out of the picture, are they just going to sell the franchise to Tencent and then we get nothing but mobile games for the rest of the future? Who knows? It's kind of a worrying thing to think about, but do they want to make a new game in this franchise? I was thinking about it this way. Say, for example, like it was our job to start a new Tekken project right now. Just one example that came to mind. Remember how Lars used to have that shitty red outfit in the older games, and now he has his lion armor thing with the red scarf? Somebody had to come up with that and design it. An artist had to draw it, and then they had to put it in the game. If you want to make a new Tekken game, you have to figure out what he's going to dress like in the next game, and then you have to make that happen, and you have to do the same thing for every single legacy character. And you have to come up with stages and music and the story. Well, the story probably, let's be honest, they could write that in 5 minutes. But all these other things that you have to think about, it's a project that will take years, cost millions. You have to hire people. You know how, I mean, people who are my age, we had these really anticipated big games coming out when we were kids, and then they came out and they were dog shit. And there are all these videos now on YouTube you can watch where people go behind the scenes and talk about what actually happened. It turns out it's not always about people not having the best intentions. It can be stuff like issues with hardware, people buying and selling companies, just the wrong people in charge, all kinds of reasons that a project can go really, really wrong. I mean, how many videos have you seen on YouTube talking about what actually happened with Marvel Infinite and why it failed? I mean, Maximilian alone has made 30 videos about that. So there you go. You can start one of these projects, and even though you do your best, it could go wrong. It could go really wrong, and even if you do manage to bring what you wanted to market, it might not find its audience and it might flop, and it's a huge risk. And you compare that to, for example, making a new character for Tekken 7 right now. All you really need to do once you've made the character is release one screenshot of that character with a date on the screenshot for the release, and then you're done. That is going to market and sell itself because of content creators. They're going to buy that character first day. They're going to be videos all over, and you're going to sell tens of thousands of copies or units within the first few hours probably. And even if you don't, it's not that big a deal because this is already a successful project and you didn't invest that much time and money into that last little piece of content. Compared to the giant risk of starting a new game, I mean, it's so preferable for a business to do it that way. But I started thinking about like George Lucas, this young, hungry filmmaker who has an idea for this kind of awkward sci-fi / fantasy film he wants to make, and he gets a lot of help, and he's barely able to sort of slap it together. Not slap it together because I think there was a lot of effort, sort of cobble it together. And it turns into something really special. I don't think A New Hope is a very good movie, honestly. It's very flawed in a lot of ways, but I have warm, fuzzy feelings for it. It's a really enjoyable watch because it has that feeling, it has that heart. There's that spark behind it, And then you think about years later, people sell that franchise for billions of dollars to a giant company, and they make this gigantic trilogy of films designed by committee to be as correct and successful as possible. And even though it has maximum everything, it just lacks that spark and that heart where it feels hollow. It really does. If it had heart, I think we would forgive it for its flaws. It's kind of what love is about, forgiving something or somebody for their flaws because of how you feel about them. And so I think it would be a really great idea to gamble on something completely new and fresh in terms of Tekken, but it just is a question of whether or not they're willing to take a chance on that. It's not like they can point to it working in the past. I mean, look at Tekken 4. That was the most creative, new direction thing they've tried to do, and it wasn't really a big success for a Tekken game, even though it's definitely interesting. Looking back on it, it really is an interesting game. But okay, say that the next thing we get is some sort of new content, a Season 5. I wrote down a couple of notes, like a wish list for what you could put in. Characters that I would be happy to see for legacy characters, there are only really two. I would like Wong and Roger, and that's basically it. I know people don't love Roger, but for me, that arcadey feel of silly Japanese arcade games where you have super serious characters, but then you also have those silly characters like Bears and Lucky Chloe. I kind of like that. It doesn't mean that you can't have an interesting character in terms of gameplay either. So I would love to have a version of Roger or Alex back. And I also liked Wong. I thought he was cool. People talk about, Beck and Bruce. There are a couple of legacy characters you could draw from, but I think the whole issue with trying to make more content for Tekken 7 right now is the developers definitely know which way the wind is blowing. They have to talk about the issues we have with the game. They have to talk about netcode. They have to talk about cheating. And I think the entire catch-22 is, as much as they might want to, they do not have the tools or the ability to fix those problems. And I think the big disconnect with the community is that we know that they know about these problems, but it feels like they're pretending that they aren't there. And they have to do that because they work in a big corporation. I mean, if they came out and they said, we know we have these serious issues, we don't have a good way of solving it right now, the only way would be to release a completely new product, they can't be that honest or that transparent because they work for that company. They're not going to get away with it. Maybe they would want to be that honest, but they can't be. Excuse me, I'm going to have another drink. A little sippy sip. But you know what I mean. even if they came out and said in Season 5, we're going to have just 1 or 2 characters and then the entire focus is going to be on rebalancing and better online infrastructure and ranking system and anti-cheat or whatever, I don't think many people would trust them at this point. I can tell you for a fact that I wouldn't until I saw it. Definitely not until I saw it, because we've been lied to in the past. They've told us about all this new great online infrastructure, netcode, balance that they're going to bring us, and then right now the game is actually worse than it was a couple of years ago in terms of those things. So I think it would be very difficult for them to gain a lot of goodwill with more content for this game. So what if it is a new project? Well, I really hope that they don't try and do something silly like, some sort of strange free-to-play bullshit with some sort of store. I hope that stays as far away as possible from fighting games, that it's just genuinely a typical fighting game coming out, the way we would expect it to. But what do you do, right? Because you're releasing a new game in this franchise, and I think it's easy to, as a starting point, think about that in terms of what do you add? What new things can we add? But is that really the right perspective when we have a game that is this old and this, you could call it bloated, it has this many features, so many characters. What about stripping it down and trying to make it a sort of back to basics kind of experience? Aris made a good video. He fucks around a lot, but when he actually gets serious and talks about Tekken or the franchises that he loves in an honest way, it's always really inspiring to me. But he talked about this idea of revamping Tekken. No Tekken, just call it Tekken, give it the Rambo treatment or whatever. I don't really care what they name it, but a kind of going back to basics and really focusing on what made Tekken 2 and 3 so special. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And then it becomes this fire sale of what do you keep and what do you get rid of. Do you even keep the Korean backdash cancel? How would people feel if that no longer was a thing? Because I love Korean backdash cancels, and I also put in a lot of effort learning how to do them, and that's the whole thing with advanced movement. Casual players or new players, think that it would be better if it were easier because they haven't learned it yet. The people who have feel robbed if it just goes away. It's kind of obvious how that debate is always going to go, but honestly, something radical like that could be interesting to me. So I made a list of what do you keep and what do you get rid of, and I think I would love for armor to stay. I think armor is something that they've implemented very successfully, and I think it adds a lot to Tekken 7. I think out of all of the new features, I think people forget that armor is new in Tekken 7. They talk about wall bounce and they talk about rage art and rage drive, but I think the reason is that armor just fits so beautifully and organically into the game that we have right now that you forget that it wasn't always there. I think armor is great. I think we have to keep the wall. I honestly feel like now I don't like wall-less stages in Tekken 7 anymore, because I feel like it just... some characters specialize in wall-less stages, but it's kind of like you strip away so many of the important mechanics of the game. Tekken is so focused on the wall and playing with the wall and strategizing with the wall and working with angles and combos and Oki at the wall. It's the most fun part of the game almost, and I almost feel sad when I end up on a wall-less stage because all those features go away. Because in those old Tekken games, the wall wasn't there. I think it has to stay. And I think I also like wall bounce just because of the huge fun factor. And I kind of like, if we're going to have some sort of comeback mechanic in this game, I think the best one we've ever had is rage drive. I think that rage art definitely needs to go in the next game. Not because I think it's overpowered or anything. I always think about it this way. So rage arts are like these super hype little cinematics that you put in a trailer when you make a new character and people get excited. It's like an iconic move of the character, but we've seen them so many times right now. If all of these characters have the exact same rage arts in the next game, it's just going to feel so tired and like a waste of time, and you can't use them for hype advertisement and trailers because they're not new. So are you going to come up with a new cinematic rage art for all of those characters? I mean, it doesn't even seem viable, right? But a rage drive is just you stick some blue jizz and some interesting properties on a move that the character already has. You can give multiple rage drives to characters. You can change which is the rage drive move for a character between versions. So maybe next time Dragunov doesn't have a blue version of his Russian assault, maybe he has a blue version of some other move, you know? I think that's a great idea. So if they're going to keep that, I think that's the best comeback mechanic, honestly, we've ever had in Tekken. And then what to get rid of, rage arts, and then I think they should get rid of spin. I just think simplified combos would be a really great idea. And I always bring up Soul Calibur as a good example of how you can have very, very short and very simple combos that are still fun, powerful, and feel really rewarding. I don't think we need soft resets in every combo anymore. And then in terms of movement, what did I write down? Big buffs to both stepping and homing. And I think what I meant by that is I want sideways movement to be really important and cool and good again, and then I want homing moves to matter. So it becomes like this, right? Moving sideways is powerful, but everybody has reasonably fast, reasonably good homing moves. So if you think that your opponent will step or walk, then you have something you can go to contend with it. It's not good if you end up in a situation where anybody can just always slip to the side and avoid everything, by step guarding even. I don't think that's very healthy. So it should be effective when you're trying to avoid something, but there should also be a countermeasure. Homing moves right now are basically unimportant. There are a couple in the game that are good, but I mean, half the roster, they don't have a homing move that works. They have to pick a move that tracks to the side they want to go to, or they have to like dash and step or do something to keep up and like try and realign. But homing moves aren't really that important of a concept anymore. So I'd like both of those to get buffed, and they kind of balance each other out a little bit. And then the last thing I wrote was just I want the next game to have much less safety on block, because I think safety on block, honestly, big safe counter hit mids is like the name of the game right now. That and constant stance mix-ups, and it just makes the whole thing a little bit stale. So more of a focus on creativity and unpredictable situations. Just, now I'm in this mix-up situation again. Am I going to crouch? Yes or no, and then I get it right or wrong, and then it keeps going. There's a lot of that in the game right now, especially in certain matchups, and I would like it to be a little bit more wild. These changes would make legacy skill become a huge factor again, and some people think that's unhealthy for new players, but if you have a good ranked environment where you don't have to play against super skilled veterans when you're a new player, I don't think that's much of a problem. And we've seen during the course of Tekken 7 how new players went from complete noobs to, pro level players. There are some of those players out there who started in 7 and now are world class. And I don't think we should underestimate the ability of the community to adapt to a game that is difficult. I think people get generally excited about the idea of a journey towards, higher skill. Who knows? And I think new people at the helm and communication from Namco could be really good as well. There's this symbiosis, that happens between the content creators and the streamers and the people who make the game. And I don't know, but I feel like that symbiosis has kind of been damaged lately. And more developers are kind of openly expressing just plain dislike for the people who make content about their games. That whole thing with World of Warcraft and actual developers saying that they hate Asmongold and think he's toxic or whatever. It's just really strange and seems petty. maybe I shouldn't be talking about this. I guess I am about to. I've heard reasonably credible rumors. They are just rumors, but from the inside that I am officially blacklisted by Namco, and they have decided that they never want to work with me or some of my friends or the people that I talk to. And again, that could be completely untrue. They might not know about me. They might not give a fuck. But I've heard those rumors, and I've heard that the reason is, the podcast appearances and the podcast that we've made, things like Wave Dash. And if that's true, I think it's honestly kind of weird because, I'm glad that I was kind of old when I started making videos for the first time, because I sat down and I made a set of rules for myself. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it this way. I'm never going to attack anybody personally. I'm never going to say something mean about a specific person unless I'm obviously joking. No drama ever. I will never try and be like controversial or inflammatory for more views or anything like that, or clickbait, again, unless I'm obviously joking. And I know that I've stuck by those principles of mine since I started. I know that for a fact. I would have remembered if I made an exception. So even though I've made hundreds of videos, I know I'm comfortable with the fact that I haven't been unfair to Namco. I haven't attacked anybody. I've made a couple of sarcastic jokes for sure, but nothing ad hominem, nothing like that. So if it is true that the people who make this game dislike me and decide that they never want to collaborate with me, I'm absolutely fine with that, by the way, because I wouldn't be interested in this point. I don't have a lot of interest in anything like that. When I made my first video, my dream was to be asked to get to commentate a tournament one day or something like that, but I'm not that naive anymore, and not interested at all in that kind of a thing. But if the crime is being a bit too honest, if these people are trying to advertise and sell their product in one way, and then you have these content creators out there who are experts on your product, you can kind of see the stress of it. Imagine that you go to work and you try and do your job, and then you try and sell the products or the things that you've made, but in the in-between, there's this bunch of experts who don't work for you, who aren't associated with you, but who know a lot about your product, more than you in some cases, that just review or criticize or explain it all over the internet. It must be really stressful, and it must be really inconvenient when it doesn't go your way. But like I said, I know for a fact that I've always been at least honest. I've had opinions out there and you might disagree with them, but that's all it is. So I don't know. It is interesting how more and more developers just seem to be tired or annoyed with the content creators. And I'm reminded of that great video where Steve Jobs talks about what happens with companies that become sort of industry leaders, because when you're not struggling to innovate or chase that position anymore, the only people who can really create growth in a company are money people, advertisers and salespeople and marketing people. And so they tend to rise up within the organizations, and they end up in positions of influence and power. But that also means, by extension, that the people making the decisions aren't those creative, hungry people who have that spark and that passion. And I think that honestly describes what we're seeing with a lot of my favorite video game franchises and film franchises these days, Tekken included. Not that I know what happens on the inside, really. And I don't want to say that I don't think that there are creative people working on Tekken right now. Just look at Lydia. That's obviously a character design where a lot of love and creativity went into making the character, and I think the same is true for Leroy. I think the same is true for Fakumlam. I was going to say Kunimitsu, but I'm not comfortable saying that about her. But I think those artists and those people doing that are doing a great job, and then it's actually being sort of influenced and ruined by people who are influencing or editing or pressuring for that content to be a certain way and be balanced in a certain way and be sold in a certain way. And it's such a shame, honestly. because, like I always say, I don't know what it does for the long-term health of these games. It would be cool to have people in charge who, for example, play a lot of online and who just love online. Imagine such a thing. I mean, people make fun of online. They say that it's nothing like offline. Online is illegitimate. It doesn't matter what rank you have. It's dog shit, whatever. But I think if you are the biggest fighting game in the world and you're making some sort of new entry in your franchise, honestly, right now, the main focus, I mean, there's no excuse. Your next game should have the best netcode of any fighting game ever made. If any game is going to have that, it should be Tekken 8. It should be fantastic. And if 99.9% of all the matches of Tekken ever played are played online, then no matter how you feel about it, it is an important game mode. And online Tekken is sort of, I mean, it's completely based almost in like a hate and frustration. People, just dislike each other so much, and they're so frustrated when they play this game online. I think a really interesting direction to go with a game like this would be to try and minimize that frustration in any way you can. Flawless, perfect netcode, good balance, and a ranking system where it feels like all the matches are as fair as possible. You're not running into cheaters, you're not running into smurfs. I think that could honestly be like a super healthy direction for a game like this, but I don't know. How many posts do you see on Reddit in the comments section of videos like, oh, am I just worthless at this? I'm giving up. This game is frustrating me, and I'm crying, I'm breaking things, and I hate myself. I mean, there's so much of that. How many salty videos of people screaming or throwing controllers? That's what Tekken Online is. I watched a recent Harada's Bar episode, and they talked about how good popular modern games are all about social interaction and having chat and groups and stuff. I mean, imagine having just complete PM systems in online Tekken right now. You would get death threats after every single match. It's just that kind of a game, It's become a bit of a tradition that in the later halves of these episodes I just tell you stories about random things that have happened to me, and I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about in this one. I think I'm going to focus on just one, and I'll keep the rest for other videos, but I've mentioned a couple of times that I used to work for this hotel franchise here in Japan, this chain of hotels that doesn't exist anymore because it all went belly up when Corona came. The pandemic hasn't exactly been beneficial to the Asian tourism industry, but I was remembering this one incident because yesterday I was walking home late at night and I happened to walk past this building where I used to work. It's been abandoned for a long time now, but apparently they have finally demolished it because yesterday there was just an empty plot right there. Where there used to be 3 big buildings interconnected where I worked for many years, and it was weird because, it is Japan, which means that I spent a lot more time there than I did in my home or anywhere else. There was a lot of working late at night or working through the night or sleeping on my desk or underneath it, things like that. So even though I definitely didn't have fond feelings about the place, it was weird that, a period of my life just had gotten erased from the face of the earth, if that makes sense. But I remember this one thing that happened a couple of years ago. I was working in that building in the office on the first floor, and around noon I just happened to look up at the monitors. We had these monitors where you could, through security cameras see what was going on in the lobby or around the building. And there was this young Chinese girl who walked in to check in. I know she was from China because when you check into a hotel in Japan by law, you have to show copies of your passport at the front desk. And we had all those, logged in the back in the office. And there was just something that seemed off about her. She had a face mask on and sunglasses, and this is, long before the pandemic. So it was still kind of rare to see people walk around with masks, even though it does happen here in Asia. So I just remember clocking that, and then 2 or 3 days later I was working in the office again, and I just happened to look at the monitors around the same time, and I saw another young Chinese woman walking in with a face mask and sunglasses and checking in. So I went and looked at the passport copy that she gave, and I just had this feeling that the face in the passport and the face of the person checking in wasn't the same person. It wasn't the same face. It was difficult to tell, but it was also kind of obvious in a way, you know. So at that point, I sort of kept my eye on it. I noticed, in our system that both of those ladies had been staying on the same floor in the same type of room, the cheapest room we had, which was a smoking single room. They were all up on the 7th floor. And then late at night, I started noticing these weird guys sometimes walking in and through the lobby and just getting in the elevators. And this isn't really something that you're supposed to do. It might be different in Europe and America, I don't know, but you don't really in Japan walk into a hotel and then just ignore the staff and go in the elevators. You're supposed to get your key or interact with the staff some way so that there's an indication that you're actually staying there and not just some random person. But it is also Japan. You don't really talk to strangers or ask questions unnecessarily, so my colleagues were just kind of, ignoring it and not noticing it. But one of these guys walks in, staring at his phone, pretending we're not there, and then getting in one of the elevators. So I decided to just check, and I went out into the lobby. And you know how you have those lights above an elevator where you can tell which floor the elevator is going to? He was getting off on the 7th floor, where I knew that these girls were staying. And it happened a couple more times, and I'd noticed a sort of pattern, so I kept my eyes on it, and I tried to talk to my boss and my colleagues about it, but they were like, you're obsessing about it or looking too deep into it, it's nothing, or whatever. But I had a really weird, bad feeling about it. And then, long story short, turns out what was happening was that the Japanese mob were going to China, to these rural places, and finding these young girls and telling them that if you want to make a bit of money, you can come and work for us for 3 months in Japan, because you can go to Japan on a tourist visa. They give you 90 days. You can be here for 3 months without some sort of special permit. And then, we send you back and you will have made enough money to make, a slightly better life for yourself. But when they got to Japan, what happened was they would have their passports confiscated. They would be handed different passports and be told to go to a specific place, like a specific hotel, and check into a specific room under a specific name. And once they were in the room, they were not to leave until they were called for. And then later at night, these guys would walk in and go up to the hotel room and basically, have sex with these girls for money, right? And the way they had set up the system, it's kind of advanced, honestly. The only reason I figured it out was one night, this weird blonde guy walked in, Japanese dude, and asked to speak with someone in the management. So I went out and talked to him, and he said, have you seen, some suspicious people walking around maybe up on the 7th floor lately? And I was like, great. I thought it was an undercover police officer who would come to help us out. So I was really excited, and I started, telling him all these things and information because I wanted him to, help us sort it out. We had, families, young children staying there, and I had this awful feeling that, these girls were, something horrible was happening to them. So I wanted to do something about it, even though my bosses were telling me, stay out of it and pretend you see nothing because we don't want trouble, kind of a thing. Turns out I was being a bit of an idiot, because this guy was not an undercover police officer or anything like that. He was actually a mobster from a different gang, and they were having problems that they wanted our help with because they ran a dating website. Some sort of Tinder equivalent, I guess, where you could meet people, but everybody knew sort of underneath the surface that this app was actually a service for prostitution. And they were running this site, and what was happening was you had these beautiful Japanese models on the site chatting with their clients in perfect Japanese. And then, the message would come, I'm in this hotel on, this floor in this room, come up here. And they would go in and they would go to meet these girls. But when they go up to the room, it's not the girl in the picture. It's this, poor young Chinese girl who doesn't even speak Japanese. And at that point, the client, I guess, don't know what to call them, would have the choice of either doing what he came there to do or just leaving. But because they had to pay beforehand using PayPal before they got the number of the room, there were no refunds, and what they were doing is still technically illegal in this country, even though it isn't enforced, so they couldn't really do anything about it, right? And that sort of, explained the situation a bit to me. So at that point I was pissed with this guy as well, and I asked him to leave. But what I decided to do was, when these guys would walk in the evenings, I would just go up to them and say, "Good evening, how are you? May I have your room number, please?" I would ask them who they were and why they were there, and they would never have, "No, I'm just here to see a friend and so. Well, if you're not staying with us, or I'm sorry, I can't let you in," and stuff like that. And sometimes I would just straight up say, "She's not in there, you're being scammed," or whatever. And some of them, they got red-faced and ran away. One guy cried. One guy shook my hand and thanked me. But I hated these guys. I found them so fucking disgusting. I just didn't want any of them to go up to the room. Just thinking about those poor fucking girls up there, and it was just so uncomfortable and dark. And we were supposed to pretend that it wasn't happening. So I just kept stopping. Like, at one point, I think 15 guys in one night. And that blonde guy who came and sort of explained the situation a bit to me, I asked him, these girls on the website, these models, they're chatting in perfect Japanese with your clients, but the girls in the hotel don't speak Japanese. So he's like, no, they definitely have somebody around here who's watching the building, who's doing all the chatting and picking up for them in Japanese. So that night I got pissed and I decided to go and look for that person, and I found him in a parking garage across the street on the third floor. I went up and there was a guy sitting there in a car on his smartphone, and I just knew right away that that was going on. He had a perfect view of the entrance of the building and everything. And I just kept stopping these guys getting in. And then one evening when I was going home late at night, I had my bicycle behind the building, and I got off around midnight, and I walked to get my bike. Apparently word had gotten around that there was this pesky white guy causing problems, and so these four guys just walked up on me, essentially in a dark alley. They were very sort of polite and casual about it, basically asking me if I would please stop interfering with their business for no reason. They saw no reason why I should have a problem with it. But I try to explain to them that we have kids staying here, and this is our workplace, and we're not comfortable with this kind of thing going on around us or whatever. And I was kind of adamant about it. And I mean, they didn't hurt me or anything, even though they definitely weren't happy about it. And it was it's a weird feeling because you're alone, you're going home late at night, and you don't know if you're being watched or anything like that. So I took the long road home that one night, but I did keep on stopping anybody from getting in the hotel that I didn't like the look of. And after a couple of weeks, it kind of petered out, and I heard rumors that they had moved on to different cheaper hotels in the area. But that was one of the scarier moments I've had when I've run in with the sort of the seedy underbelly of Japanese society. But yeah, I hope some of you found it interesting. I know this was a very rambly episode, but like I said, I'm trying to keep it, less with a script and a bit more organic, a bit more like a conversation. I think that might be good. You guys will definitely let me know what you thought, though. Really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for being here and for listening, and I'll see you all in the next one.